Hi, I'm Lloyd Altman from Riskfocus, and I am about to present to you the presentation that I gave at the DerivOps North America Conference in Chicago on April 11th. The name of my presentation is Regulators Really Do Care, in capitals, about trade reporting data quality. And you might ask yourself, well, of course regulators care about trade reporting data quality, but they really do care in capitals. And the reason that I chose this title is because regulators are beginning to act on the fact that they're not happy with the quality of the data of derivatives that have been reported to swap data repositories, and they're beginning to act on it. And just like a teacher or a parent, the way that you show that you really care is by punishing. There are consequences for not doing things the right way. And in the case of regulators, that's in the form of fines or increased advisories and more detailed technical specifications that are forcing firms to have to react. And that's how they show that they really do care. Scope. So the scope of the presentation that I'm going to give today, for one, we're going to present the regulatory timeline for the next 3 years, explore how the regulators are looking at data quality and what they are saying, analyze the key requirements from the CFTC, EMIR, and SEC data quality initiatives and the CFTC's data quality recommendations, and then explain and demo Riskfocus's products. We have a suite called Report-it.Trade, out of which Validate.Trade and Load.Trade with a special backload feature, which really cut to the core of what you need to do to make sure that what you're submitting to a swap data repository is good and that the data is clean. This is the global regulatory requirements for the next 3 years. We maintain this, and this is not, I'm not going to drain the slide, but if you just take a look at the slide, you can see that across the world, regulators in Hong Kong, the US, across all asset classes, right? Norway, so Europe, um, Asia, there's Singapore, there's Hong Kong, there are a lot of changes that are coming into effect. And you, as reporting firms, whether you're the buy side or the sell side, need to know which regulations are coming up and need to know which changes are going to be implemented at which swap data repository. And the requirements in each region of the world is really quite different. For instance, CFTC, there's one-sided reporting. Uh, EMIR, it's two-sided reporting, but there's delegated reporting, etc. Just a few things to note in this timeline. When I gave this talk, it was in April, so MMSR and Remit 2, Remit Level 2, and South Africa were just coming on board. By the end of June, at the very latest, at least one swap data repository will be ready for the US SEC, which will set the 6-month timeline in motion for firms to backload. And that's a ticking time bomb. Once that swap data repository registers, you have 6 months. So the dealers that have a backlog of securities-based swaps that were on their book pre-enactment that are still open or that came onto their books post-enactment, meaning Dodd-Frank, and or swaps that are still open, all need to be backloaded, and for some firms, that's millions of transactions. Uh, by the middle of the year, new provinces in Canada are going to come on board, plus some real time. And then the CFTC has made recommendations, and there's a new spec. In addition to their advisory letter, there's a new spec that was issued. Request for comments closed in March, etc. So there's an awful lot going on, and that doesn't even include MIFID 2 or MIFIR, which is coming on board in January of 2018, and a new ESMA specification for EMIR reporting, which the specification came out last year, and that's supposed to be going into effect in 2018 as well. So there's an awful lot going on all at once, and it's your responsibility as well as the swap data repository's responsibility to be ready when the deadlines come. And it's all about data quality. The reason that new specifications are coming up is so that regulators have a better sense of what's being reported and they can actually measure systemic risk and regulate the markets as per their mandate. So let's talk about US regulators and data quality. So in December of 2015, the CFTC Division of Swap Dealers and Intermediary Oversight, or the DSIO letter to the swap dealers, came out and they had identified issues that they are seeing with data that's being reported to swap data repositories that report to the CFTC. And they made a bunch of recommendations for firms that report in order to make the quality of the data cleaner. For one, the existence of a data gatekeeper, so a piece of software that's examining the quality of the data before it's being submitted so that firms have a chance to clean up the data before they submit it to the swap data repository. This is all basically variations on the same theme. Automated review of reported data, erroneous error record checks. So if there is a record that came back that's been nacked or has problems, the fact that you can check that and repair it and resolve the rejections promptly. Data correction is the same theme. And improve change management practices. So when there's a change to an upstream system, the fact that you have the ability to regression test and make sure that changes in your systems do not impact what's actually being reported. Adequate testing of impacted reporting systems. These are all variations, like I said, on the same theme, and as I'll describe later, our Validate.Trade solution plugs right into this. Also, on December 22nd, a week after the DSIO advisory letter, the CFTC released a draft technical specification for certain swap data elements, which is essentially a brand new spec. So 44 fields are new, and many, many fields have changed. We were one of the firms that submitted a response. This would represent a significant reworking for all reporting firms. The allowable values and formats, counterparty related data elements, etc. Separation of price, netting of collateral, identifying events, and a second consultation is expected. And it's not really clear when the implementation date will be, especially because of the fact that firms are going to be reacting to the SEC at the same time as well. But one date that's being thrown around is December of 2017, so the end of next year. And at the bottom of the slide is a link to our response to the consultation paper. Regulation SBSR, so the SEC has come up with Regulation SBSR for securities-based swap reporting, and there's Regulation SBSDR, which is for the actual swap data repositories. The deadline for registration has been pushed for March 18th. If you had seen my post, March 18th came and went, and the sound of silence was pretty clear that no swap data repository was ready to reply. But the new revised date is no later than no later than the end of June 2016 for at least one swap data repository to be registered. But the way that the time clock works, as I mentioned before, is that once a swap data repository registers and is acknowledged by the SEC, then 6 months after that date, all securities-based swaps that are eligible to be backloaded must be backloaded. So that's when the timeline starts. The SEC technical specification for message formats, identifiers, and allowable values are very different than the CFTC. So it's not as though they just said, okay, we're just going to adopt the same spec as the CFTC with the exception of how you describe the securities-based swap. The concept of a unique identifier code, or UIC, which contains 9 fields, including branch ID and trader ID. It's a brand new concept, and the SEC is 1.5-sided reporting in the sense that both counterparties need to report UICs to the swap data repository for each transaction. So this is a huge change. So if you're, let's say, the buy side, and you expect your dealer to report a securities-based swap, you're still responsible for making sure that the UIC, specifically the all of the information that makes your participation in the securities-based swap known to the regulator, including the branch ID and trader ID, etc., needs to be reported. So there needs to be a mechanism either provided to you by the dealer or you need to upload that information directly to the swap data repository that your counterparty is also reporting to. So that's brand new. In Europe, EMIR was viewed as a principles-based legislation initially, and that was like EMIR just baseline. EMIR level one focused on the format of the data, and the field format, was defined. Blank fields weren't allowed. UTI cannot be changed. There was some basic things that went live in November of 2014, which is, by the way, when Riskfocus brought Validate.Trade to market, and the matching rates did increase. EMIR Level 2, which went live last year in at the end of September of at the end of October of 2015, was much more comprehensive. It was focused on the function of the data. Um, Correct use of action fields was mandated. That caused a lot of work. Validation of the LEI is not quite complete, and it's been live since November of 2015. Having said that, we worked with an awful lot of firms last year. It was a big push for us for Validate.Trade, and there was a press release. The DTCC GTR actually was using Validate.Trade in order to develop and test. And as I'll explain later, firms got the ability to test well ahead of the UAT period. In November of 2015, ESMA released a new technical specification for EMIR reporting. This introduces many new fields, 44 new fields, much more granular collateral reporting, product classification, and product identification. Complex trades are to be reported by leg. Existing fields are being repurposed, so it's a brand new specification. And now, level one and level two validations are now law under the new RTS. We don't know when it's going to be live. We presume it's going to be March of 2017, but this is a major rewrite in Europe, while firms are also preparing to be compliant with MIFIR reporting as well. So there's an awful lot going on there as well, and it's all focused on data quality. And then there's MIFIR. MIFIR regulation is coming. It was originally going to be January of 2017. Now it's January of 2018. And it says right in the middle, investment firms shall have responsibility for the completeness, accuracy, and timely submission of the reports which are submitted to the competent authority. So that's all about data quality. Risk-focused response to all of this is our Report-it.Trade suite, which is a control and compliance suite, and you can call it a swaps supervisory system as well. We have targeted solutions, so unlike other vendors that you might know, our components are sold as discrete components that can be used, and we don't require that you buy the whole suite. Validate.Trade, when we say SLA backed, essentially it's a subscription-based model where we maintain the rules to make sure that validation rules are in compliance with the swap data repository that you're reporting to. The fact that the DTCC uses our software as part of their GTR means that you all of the firms that use our software have that SLA that we're going to be ahead of any changes. Load.Trade with the back in square brackets, that's a secure file-based upload to trade repositories, but what it does is that it actually validates a file before submitting. So Validate.Trade is running in the background, and if the file is clean, it gets submitted. If not, you have the ability to correct it before you submit it, so you don't have to worry about receiving a file back that has NACs in it and trying to parse through the response file in order to figure out what you need to resubmit. So backload.trade validates before submission. Reportable.trade is a reconciliation system that actually firms use in order to make sure that they're not underreporting or overreporting, because that has been the thrust of a lot of the fines within the industry. So it reconciles your source system trading activity against what you actually reported and gives you a report, like I said, to make sure that you know whether or not you've underreported or overreported. And then out of validate.trade, we have transform.trade, which gives you, for instance, the ability to view FPML in a CSV format, which for the DTCC's GTR is extremely useful because you get a chance to view uh, your FPML messages the way that it's being viewed internally within the GTR. And reconcile.trade, which actually is being built off the back of reportable.trade that can reconcile the position reports that come from the trade repository against your positions to make sure that what the trade repository thinks you have is actually what you do have. If you take a look at the validation development lifecycle that we give to our clients, on the right-hand side, there's UAT and prod, and most firms, that's all they have the window to test. Swap data repository says, UAT is going to happen a month before prod, and that's when you have a chance to test whether or not what you've built for a new implementation, whether it be a new regulation or a new release, it has any problems relative to the swap data repository that you're reporting to. What we do is we give clients a beta and a pre-UAT phase. So as soon as a tech spec is issued, we, as soon as possible, implement a version of validate.trade that you can start, your developers and business analysts can start testing against as they're developing. As soon as the trade repository spec is released, we come up with a pre-UAT version, which essentially emulates the behavior of the swap data repository and provides validation rules. So that way it increases the window that you have to test against. So that way by the time you reach UAT, you should be done. We did this for ESMA Level 2. It worked quite well for our clients. In July of 2015, we released the pre-UAT version of ESMA Level 2. So by the time the DTCC's Global Trade Repository at the end of September was in UAT, the clients who were using our software had already pretty much finished testing ESMA Level 2 functionality. Also, um, again, using the DTCC as an example, if you have a release that you need to get out while a new version is in UAT, the only way that you can test changes against what's production at the trade repository is by using our tool, because we can emulate the behavior of the production version of the trade repository while the UAT version is already forward looking. So that came in extremely handy during the UAT period for our clients that were using our software. So the global regulatory coverage, again, our SLA is that we are in sync with all of the validation rules at the trade repository, and it's across all jurisdictions and all asset classes and all message types. So we do regulatory validation, we do repository validation. Right now, it's a very GTR specific implementation, but we already are speaking to clients and have plans within the next year to roll out CME and Univista and HKTR. Validator Plus Plus gives clients the ability to build their own rules, and it's 100% customizable. And emulation, which we consider to be an added bonus, is the fact that if you use our software in emulation mode, you have your own version, pretty much what we call a GTR in your pocket or a trade repository in your pocket. You can actually receive the same messages back that you would be getting from the trade repository, but now you can do volume testing and regression testing and not have to worry about exceeding any limits or whether or not the UAT environment is or any testing environment is available from a trade repository. You have a piece of software that's emulating that behavior, and our clients use that very heavily. This is a screenshot of the Validate.Trade Analyst Workbench. I wasn't allowed to give a demo at the conference. You can see by taking a look at the screenshot that for each message, if you use the GUI that we provide, you have the ability to see how many rules out of our rules database were applied to each message, which ones failed and why, and which ones passed, which is important in terms of keeping an audit trail of your swap supervisory control framework. The fact that you can keep an audit trail of which rules passed as well as which rules failed. And then if you fix the message, the fact that they all passed. Uh, in terms of what the regulators want to see for your swap supervisory control framework for reporting, our clients find this extremely important. And also one of the features of Validate.Trade, which I mentioned before, is the ability to take a look, if you're passing in FPML, to take a look at a flattened view of that FPML. Our clients are using that. Load.Trade, or as it will also be called Backload.Trade, is the full file submission service that we're standing up as a managed service that validates files of transactions to be reported, uh, and gives you the ability to view on a console the quality of the file, and you can set it up so that if the file is completely clean, then it automatically submits, and then it waits for the response file to come back, and then you have a consolidated view of all of your submissions with the ability to drill down and take a look at the details. And for regulation SBSR, there are going to be two SBSR specific versions. One, as I mentioned before, is backload.trade, the ability to validate and then backload all of the trades that are eligible to be submitted before the 6-month cutoff. And then there's a version of load.trade that's going to be specific for the UICs so that the buy side has a tool that will allow them to submit their UICs for each trade directly to the trade repository. And the third module, and this is a screenshot, is Reportable.Trade, which I mentioned before. This screenshot shows the ability to drill down all correctly reported, underreported, and overreported messages based on your source system trading activity being reconciled against what you actually reported to the trade repository. And the fourth category is correctly not reported trades that you didn't report correctly. Right now, there is a free trial version of Validate.Trade called Validate on Demand, and the link is right there on the slide. It's https://ondemand.validate.trade. It's a hosted solution. It allows you to upload, validate, and inspect up to 100 messages per day, either FPML or CSV single message file, so it's only one message at a time, and it allows you to log in using your LinkedIn credentials. That's the one way that we thought of to give clients the ability to experience using Validate.Trade and see the types of rules that we apply before licensing the software. And it's free and available right now. And that's my presentation. If you have any questions, please call me at the phone number listed here or send me an email. And thank you very much.